Okay.
So, in the idea of divine command theory, basically the theory that would you be able to object to anything that God says, whether it's a monotheistic belief or a polytheistic belief? Now, coming to this, it's interesting because we're going to talk about what's called the Euthyphro dilemma, whereas is something good because the gods command it, or are they good because they're inherently good, right? So we're also going to talk about how that relates to evil, the problem of suffering, et cetera, et cetera. So first, we're talking about the divine command theory. Where does it come from? So overall, divine command theory comes from what people would say is divine revelation, of course, like stuff like Bible, Quran, Torah, etc. Also talk about these ancient Greek myths like Zeus, Heracles, stuff like that. So if you want to talk a little bit about divine command theory and how people receive and react to it.
Sure. I have a question, and that's we're saying where it comes from. You're talking about where the morality comes from. Or do you also mean who came up with the term divine command theory? Like, is there a name of a specific philosopher who was responsible for that classification?
I believe it was Plato, but I could be wrong.
Okay, because I don't remember him saying that in the Euthyphro dialogue, but I understand that that's definitely something that he's critiquing in there.
Oh no, it was Saint Augustine. Okay, interesting. That's a way off. My bad. Anywho, so we're gonna talk about the Freitag dilemma first. So I guess a question that that's philosophers still trying to grasp to this day is if God commands something, does it make it moral and good because God commanded it, or does God command it because the goodness is distinct from what God commands? So how would you tackle that?
Okay, so everything from oh no, it was to this point I couldn't hear.
All right, I'll try it again. So is something good because God commanded it, or something what's it called? God commanded inherently good. Like is the goodness distinct from God's command, or are they integral in a way?
Okay. And did you say this was a particular philosopher who came up with this idea?
This is the Euphrate dilemma.
Okay. I'm sorry, could you please restate that?
Okay, it's okay. So is something good because God commanded it, or is something God commanded inherently good without the presence of God?
Well, I think the thing to keep in mind there is when you're reading the Euthyphro dilemma, Plato, you there?
Yeah, we're back.
Okay. Where was I when I cut out?
You're talking about how the when Socrates wrote down, you would talk about how the gods can't agree on what would be piety versus, sin.
Yeah, the gods in the Euthyphro dilemma are the classical Greek gods, and these all had disagreements with each other. Um, Euthyphro was making the point that he thinks that piety and justice and holiness are what the gods love.
Hmm.
But not only are the gods not consistent in what they love and what they consider to be piety and to be good and evil, the fact that they love like holiness or that they love justice implies that these are things that are beyond those gods.
Hmm.
And if they don't come from, yeah. So one the question that Soccer, okay, okay. So where were we to begin with? Because yeah, now I got this point here, which is I think one of the
So
most important parts.
gods cannot decide what is pious, and in order to be quote unquote pious, there has to be something above the gods that decides what would be the quote good thing and right thing to do.
Right. So I'm trying to figure out what context it was that he brought up this argument in, because yeah, because the argument is I will is the point I should first wish to understand is whether the pious or holy is beloved by the gods because it is holy or because it is beloved of the gods. Okay, yeah, and the point there is that if holiness is what is beloved by the gods, well, that doesn't make any sense because you don't love something because it's loved. You love it because it's lovable. So to
No,
say that
exactly.
yeah, so to say that what's pious or holy is what the gods like is really putting the cart before the horse. Okay, So now I'm ready to make that point again. Yeah, so to make the point more clearly, so we're talking about the Euthyphro dilemma, right? Hmm. So the dilemma is that it's talking about a particular kind of god, which are the classical Greek gods, and there are
Mhm.
similar kinds in other traditions. But these are gods who are always in conflict with one another, and
Right.
if you don't have gods that are in conflict with one another, one of uh, Socrates' critiques kind of goes out just off the face of things. But even without that, there's a deeper critique that he has because Euthyphro gives the idea that what piety is and what goodness and justice are what is beloved by the gods. But Socrates makes the point that that doesn't really make sense because you don't love something because it's loved. You love it because it's lovable.
Right.
And to say that it's beloved by the god, like something is good because it's like something is pious because it's beloved by the gods. What do the gods love? Piety. You're putting the cart before the horse there. You're not really explaining what it is that's pious that the gods are loving in the first place.
Yeah.
And around once they really get into this question, that's really where Euthyphro's understanding of the situation and ability to really explain himself kind of breaks down. So not only is it a question of gods being in conflict with each other, but it's also a question of them loving some sort of concept of a piety that's external to themselves, something that, they love it, but why do they love it?
Hmm.
So there seems to be some kind of arbitrariness to what the gods do and don't appreciate. And that's really what Socrates is hammering down on in that dialogue. Now, that's not really applicable to every tradition as far as
Yeah.
divine command theory goes, because, there are a lot of gods in different religions. One of them would be, probably most forms of Christianity. Uh, what is loved by God is not external to God. Like it wouldn't be called like it wouldn't like God doesn't love justice and goodness and all these things in the sense of wanting those things in an external kind of way. They would be thought of as an flowing out of his overabundance. It would be something that proceeds from his nature rather than something that he is grasping after. So
Hmm.
it's not really the same critique isn't really applicable. And as far as gods being in conflict with one another, you can be, I suppose, if it's like lower level deities in something like Buddhism or Hinduism, that could be a critique. But if you get into like these ultimate principles like Brahman in Hinduism or emptiness in Buddhism, I know they probably wouldn't want to call that an absolute, but it's the same kind of point. Like the highest principle that they have is not in conflict.
Yeah. And it
So
feels
it's
like
yeah,
with having these multiple polytheistic beliefs, like the old Greek gods, it feels like the gods are being like held to a higher authority, which is our morality, compared to you know, gods where they get to decide, what's good, what's right. So like that'd be another critique of saying that are these truly, gods if they are really bound by, morality and they decide like what's good, what's not, and they're fighting each other, stuff like that. So it just doesn't make any sense to truly know like what truly is, piety as Socrates says. So
yeah.
yeah.
It depends a lot on what you mean by God, because in the Greek
Right.
world and in like the ancient pagan world and a lot of traditions today, like what they mean by God is very different from what other people mean.
Hmm.
Like they'd probably mean something closer to like some sort of secondary or creator or other kind of being, as opposed to like an ultimate principle that a bunch of other traditions would have. So it's really it doesn't make sense to classify probably most religious traditions under a divine command theory kind of umbrella. Now, as
Right.
far as whether divine command theory is valid, because I kind of misspoke there. And you could say that divine command theory, I think, is valid if the tradition or the system that you're working under doesn't have the weaknesses that the Greek pagan religious tradition has with regards to those
Yeah.
questions.
Because it's like like an Abrahamic God, for example, like because there is only one God, it doesn't have any more divine figures that are like separated. It makes sense like ultimately like his justice or his call is final at the end of the day.
And
Whereas
even if, sorry,
if you just go with the Greek gods, it's well Zeus says this, but Hera says this, etc., etc.
yeah, and even if you're like it not even just like it doesn't really like there are very few even offshoots or versions of Christianity where this would be a problem.
All right, so one of the biggest critiques against theism and divine command theory being moral is the problem of evil. So problem of evil is basically if God is morally perfect, if he is so good, and talk about the Abraham, not Abraham, well, a strict one God creator, full like all holy, perfect, blah blah blah. If this idea of God is so good and wants to end suffering, why do things like earthquakes, storms, murder, rape, etc., why does this happen if God is in control of everything? Why does he allow this evil to happen?
Well, I think the first most obvious answer is, free will is usually just the answer that's like, yeah, if you're going to allow people to make decisions that affect each other and themselves, then that's going to solve most of those problems.
Mhm.
As far as, earthquakes and things like that, like, I think there's another question here too, as far as why is there an assumption that a benevolent God would necessarily want to absolutely eliminate suffering and death?
Mhm. Kind of like a
Questions like,
presupposition,
was that?
kind of like a presupposition that you would like someone would have.
Perhaps. And like, as far as, death, for example, goes, if you've got a God who's in charge of the afterlife, then especially if he's like has the ability to judge whoever and who not, then what's the problem with him killing everybody, potentially? What if it's their time? What if it's all going to be fine,
Yeah.
So it does there would have to be a lot of qualifications uh, before positing the problem of evil before we can really understand what's being talked about, I think.
Mhm. All right. So we're kind of approaching this like a Job argument, where of course in the book of Job, where Job was put through so much suffering, so much hardship, and he never forsakes God, but always is in the end. God eventually, after Job goes to a high mountain, eventually like, oh, like why God, why'd you do this to me? God says, like, who are you to question like what I do, right? So basically, I kind of take that same stance, being like, if the creator of the universe is like making you go through stuff, like what do you like at the end, what are you gonna do about it? Like, there's nothing that you can do about it. It's kind of what I would say about that.
I kind of understand what you're saying. I don't know how that addresses the problem of evil.
I'm just saying, like, without a let's just say, like, I feel like there's really like no complaints of like evil happening to you, because that's just like God's happening to you. And again, like free will, like unfortunately with people, they can do what they want, because not everything, because we don't believe in Calvinism, for example, right? So we don't believe that God controls every single action like ever, right? And so
Oh, you hit out for a good point from there, but I don't think it really matters because I wasn't saying anything.
like all right, so basically just saying that like who are you to like question God is kind of like what I would say about that.
Okay. Well, I think if the question is why is like if the problem of evil is specifically phrased, yeah, I'm thinking about it, and questioning the problem of evil is like, okay, why do you consider evil to be suffering and whatever? That's one track to go down, and I think we can do that. And as far as questioning the authority, that's another one. But I guess also if you wanted to address the question behind the question, because if the problem of evil is really asking why is there suffering, then I think you do kind of have to go a little bit deeper into it because
Hmm.
Why couldn't an omnibenevolent God just make things so there's no suffering?
Hmm.
Um, because theoretically he could, right? I
Sure.
think it does have to be a a free will answer. And if you have natural disasters or things like that that you would think are not the consequence of, human actions or the actions of like, lower wills, that would be a problem. So you do have to posit wills that are responsible for those actions, whether they're human. For example, in the Orthodox perspective, the fall has a cosmic scope. Sure. Yeah, so I think that if we wanted to address the question behind the question of the problem of evil, rather than critiquing the ideas of what constitutes evil, you just want to go with the bare bones kind of assumed idea that evil is suffering,
Hmm.
then I think that if you want to be consistent and clear in defending against the problem of evil, there would have to be causes for the problems in the world that don't come from God. Because otherwise, of course, if he's omnibenevolent and he causes a bunch of problems, that causes an issue. But if they're caused by lower wills who are allowed to act freely, then that solves that problem. For example, in the Orthodox Christian perspective, all death and suffering in the world is either directly or secondarily caused by the actions of human beings or of demons. So, and especially human beings with regard to anything physical going on. So, I mean, that doesn't cover like all natural disasters, but the fact that there is death in the world and suffering would come directly from human actions. And as far as why they're permitted to make those actions, because that's the other question, like, well, why wouldn't God just keep people from making the decisions that would cause these things to happen?
Yeah.
The idea there is that if you compel positive behavior, like let's say that you
That's
have a
kind of like
girlfriend.
a sorry, it's kind of like a Giver situation of the book about how everyone lives on like a dystopia or whatever. Like
I've read
people.
The Giving Tree. I've not read The Giver.
Oh, okay. Basically, it's a book about a dystopian future where all the pain, suffering, evil thing has gone away, and everyone's like this mindless robot that just does their daily tasks, and everything's like controlled by the government. It's a really like creepy book. And in the end, it says that having free will is inevitably like better as opposed to living like robots,
Okay.
which is
Yeah,
interesting.
because let's say you're interested in somebody, romantically, or it could be a family member. Not that you're romantically interested in your family member. I mean, like the different kinds of love here. Like you have a friend or something. You're not going to want to compel that person to behave positively towards you. And from a lot
Has
of
to be
religious
natural.
perspectives, all positive action is grounded in um, ultimately fidelity to God in some way. And so if you're going to compel that, then it kind of ruins the point of it.
Hmm. I
You
see.
could have a bunch of like, the Sims NPCs, but well, why would you do that? Is kind of the idea there.
Yeah, again, that's like the you should read the book or watch the movie, whatever. It's really interesting, really creepy though at the same time. It's like, ugh. All right, well, that'll be it, Ben. Thanks for hopping on and helping me with my stuff. And yeah, just that's it. Anything lastly you wanna say?
There is one thing,
Okay.
and it has to do with evil in the Euthyphro dilemma.
Hmm.
And it was interesting that Socrates makes the statement essentially that there's no people don't do evil knowing that it's evil, or that people consider different things good and different things are evil, and that's why conflicts arise. That implies that people don't do things that are evil knowing that it's evil, and that's another element that I think could be critiqued as far as the problem. I don't know if it's directly related to the problem of evil, but it's an interesting Greek idea that
Yeah, it's
isn't
like
shown
the
to everybody.
pursuit of the good, I would say.
Hmm.
All right, well, I'm gonna end it here. Thanks for taking your time. Sorry it was kind of short, but yeah, it's whatever.
No
But anyway,
problem.
All right, take care, Ben.
Have a good one.